Charlie Javice.
Charlie Javice.
Charlie Javice.
Charlie Javice, folks.
Charlie Javice, convicted of defrauding JPMorgan of $175 million.
On a Tuesday morning in 2022, a marketing executive at JPMorgan Chase hit send. They were targeting their newest, most expensive asset, a database of 4.25 million college students. JPMorgan had just paid $175 million for this list. They called it the Amazon of higher education. But within minutes, the red alerts started screaming. 70% of those emails bounced back. They were hitting servers that didn't exist. They were addressed to people who were never born. This wasn't a glitch. It was a $175 million crime scene. The world's largest bank, with an army of 350 due diligence experts, had just been taken for everything. Not by a cartel, not by a foreign government, but by one 29-year-old visionary named Charlie Javice. She didn't use a high-tech virus or a team of hackers. She used one math professor, an $18,000 invoice, and the one thing bankers value more than money: trust. This is the story of how a single person pulled off the most embarrassing scam in Wall Street history, and how she made the world's most powerful bank pay her to do it. To understand how a 29-year-old outplayed a $400 billion bank, you have to understand how she set the honeypot. In the world of espionage, a honeypot isn't just about a person. It's about creating a perfect reality that the target is too hungry to question. By 2021, JPMorgan Chase was starving. They were losing the battle for the next generation. Their competitors were locking down student accounts. And Jamie Dimon, the king of Wall Street, was terrified of being left behind. Charlie Javice didn't just walk in with a pitch deck. She walked in as the answer to their prayers. She used weaponized prestige, a Wharton degree, a Forbes 30 Under 30 title, the perfect Ivy League smile. She was a master of soft power seduction. She didn't try to break through their front door. She made them open it and invite her in. She told them she had 4.25 million students ready to become lifelong JPMorgan customers. To a bank, that's not just data. That's an empire. She knew that when a giant is desperate to win, they stop acting like a predator and start acting like prey. She rushed their 350-person due diligence team by hinting that Bank of America was also looking at her. This is the oldest trick in the book, artificial scarcity. She made JPMorgan feel if they looked too closely, they'd lose the prize to their biggest rival. So instead of a forensic audit, they gave her a $175 million check. They didn't realize they were being honey-trapped by their own FOMO. And the best part? She made them feel like they were the ones winning. In the world of high-stakes espionage, the best way to hide a lie is to dress it in a moral virtue. When JPMorgan's 350-person due diligence team finally asked to see the raw database, Javice didn't flinch. She used the privacy shield. She looked the most powerful bankers in the world in the eye and said, "I can't show you that. I have to protect my students." She claimed that sharing names and addresses would violate privacy laws. It was a masterstroke of soft power manipulation. By pretending to be an ethical founder protecting vulnerable students, she made the bank feel predatory for even asking. She made them feel like the bad guys for doing their jobs. The psychological block worked perfectly. Instead of demanding the data, the bank agreed to a compromise that would lead to their downfall. They agreed to use a third-party validator. This sounds secure, but in reality, it was the final door opening for the scam. JPMorgan told the validator to simply count the rows in the database to confirm the 4.25 million users. But Javice knew a secret. The vendor was only looking at the quantity, not the authenticity. They were counting digital shells, not real humans. But there was still one problem. She didn't actually have 4 million rows of data to show them. she had less than $300,000. She tried to convince her own engineering director, Patrick Vavor, to create the rest. She told him it wasn't illegal. She tried to seduce him into the scheme with promises of wealth. But Vavor saw the cliff they were driving toward. He refused, telling her he wasn't going to jail for a lie. Most people would have quit. But a true operative doesn't quit. They just find a new asset. And she found one for just $18,000. With her engineering director out of the way, Charlie Javice was in a race against time. JPMorgan was breathing down her neck for the data. She reached out to a math professor in New York with an urgent pinch. She didn't ask for advice. She asked for a miracle. The task? Take a real list of 300,000 students and turn them into 4.25 million. This is where we see the synthetic data mechanism. It's a process normally used by intelligence agencies or medical researchers to create safe data that looks real but protects real people. But Javice didn't want to protect anyone. She wanted to manufacture an army. Over a single night, Professor ran scripts to breed her 300,000 users into millions of ghosts. Using algorithms, they created unique-looking names, birthdays, and addresses. They even invented a fake student named Catherine Gordy. She had a home address, a phone number, and a college major. But Catherine Gordy didn't exist. She was a digital ghost, born from a line of code. When the job was done, Javice sent a chilling text to her chief growth officer. "I found my genius." She wasn't talking about his intellect. She was talking about his ability to lie with numbers. But she knew she had to cover the scent. She instructed the professor to send an invoice for $18,000. But there was one condition. The word synthetic data had to be erased from the paper trail. It was billed as a generic data analysis. To JPMorgan, this looked like a standard fee for a standard audit. In reality, it was the receipt for a $175 million crime scene. She had her ghosts. Now, she just had to sell them to the bank. In the fall of 2021, the deal was done. Charlie Javice walked into JPMorgan not as a vendor, but as a managing director. She had her $21 million payout and a massive retention bonus waiting. But the honeypot she built had a major flaw. It required the bank to never actually talk to her customers. To cover her phantom army, she engaged in one last brazen scam. She went to a data broker and bought a real list of 4.5 million students for just $105. Think about that. She bought a list for the price of a luxury car and sold it to the world's largest bank for $175 million. She hoped that if she swapped her ghosts for these real names, the bank would be too busy counting their profits to notice. But JPMorgan's marketing team was ready to weaponize their new data. They selected a sample of 400,000 students and hit send on a massive email campaign. In a normal bank operation, the delivery rate is near perfect. On Charlie's list, it was a 70% bounce rate. Tens of thousands of emails hit servers that didn't exist. The response was a wall of digital silence. When JPMC investigators finally looked at the raw files she provided, they found something so insane, it almost feels like a joke. The list Javice provided had exactly 1,048,576 rows. Why is that number a smoking gun? It is the absolute maximum number of rows allowed in a single Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. She hadn't even used a database. She had handed the world's most sophisticated bank a glorified spreadsheet she'd filled at her kitchen table. The Amazon of higher education was just an Excel file full of bot data and digital ghosts. But the most espionage part of this story isn't the scam itself. It's the legal compromat she left behind. Because of her contract, JPMorgan was legally forced to pay her legal fees. They were essentially funding the defense of the person who scammed them for $175 million. By 2025, they had paid over $140 million just to fight her in court. The the bank didn't just buy a company, they bought a $300 million nightmare. In the world of modern espionage, every operation has an exit strategy. But for Charlie Javice, the exit led straight to a federal courtroom. In late 2025, the woman who had honey-trapped Wall Street stood before a judge in Manhattan. She was no longer the visionary managing director. She was a convicted fraudster facing the ruins of her own creation. Even in the end, she tried one last play for influence. She broke down in tears, telling the court that her collapse of character was its own punishment. Her high-priced lawyers, paid for by the very bank she robbed, tried to argue that JPMorgan wasn't a real victim. They claimed a $175 million loss was just pocket change for a titan like Jamie Dimon. But the judge saw through the final layer of the scam. He called her duplicity biblical. He told her that markets, like civilizations, depend on just weights and measures. And Charlie's weights were made of air. The final bill for her phantom army was a reality check that no algorithm could fix. 85 months in federal prison, over 7 years behind bars, and a staggering $287 million in restitution. But the true cost of this soft power warfare is still being tallied. JPMorgan Chase, the bank that prides itself on being the smartest in the room, became a global punchline. They spent $175 million to buy the company, and nearly $150 million more on legal fees for the person who scammed them. They paid for her luxury seafood towers and her Spotify subscription while she was under indictment. Charlie Javice proved that you don't need a weapon to dismantle a giant. You just need to find their ego, weaponize their FOMO, and sell them a dream they're too scared to lose. Because in the dark world of modern influence, the most dangerous operative isn't the one with the gun. It's the one with the smile, the Wharton degree, and an Excel sheet full of ghosts.